Welcome to Open Publishing Fest 2020, or in old-timey voice, Open Publishing Fest 2020. That's reasonable, right, Tom? So this is, congratulations, digit doubles, as Tom has said, of HAX Uncodes. Thank you all for appearing every week. This is now the 10th episode, we've done this 10 weeks in a row, all of quarantine. So we've all had a really great time having community in this space and getting to share our ideas. So thank you for stopping by. As always, if you want to join this, you can hop on bit.ly/hackslack, and that'll get you into our Hacks the Web Slack channel so that we can give you the password to hop on this call. We record every Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and the topics really are pretty much generated by the community and whoever shows up. So a couple of us always have an idea of something we want to discuss, but we're really open to anything as long as it's web components. And I hear a rumor we're even going to talk about React today. So we will talk about frameworks other than web component driven ones on this at times. So with that said, I know we've got a couple talks that we've got queued up. I'm going to start us off with the fact that now we have a WordPress plugin. So as we have a bunch of people here for Open Publishing Fest, what is it that we were all rambling about for 20 minutes ahead of time and why we all hang out? So the main thing that kind of started to bring us all together and having these hangouts is we work on this big crazy idea, this thing called HAX. And HAX is short for Headless Authoring Experience. And so the idea is that we have a block editor that lets us just modify the page and publish content in context with lots of extensible ways of viewing material, particularly from a library's context. Having things like licensing is a big one. So that then when we want to modify this nice, happy design asset, we have a UI over here. So you can see this says Title Wonderland, HAX the Web, and you can get live updating. In this case, giving it attribution and doing things like changing what the attribution is in place, and the creator is BTO Pro, or actually a lot of this work starts at Penn State. So it's contributed to by a bunch of different organizations, but Penn State being a big one. If I wanted to do like a grid or move stuff around, right, we have this nice, happy block editor. The big deal from an open publishing context and publishing in general is if I hit view page source, our block editor is writing a mix of native HTML tags, so like your paragraph tag, bold, list elements, but it's also writing these tags that are called web components. And web components are a standard way that developers can produce their brand new HTML tags that work in every browser. So if you're in a library context especially, this should get you really excited about the concept of highly semantic HTML and markup. So this on the page isn't just a awesome video player. It was made by Nikki. That we can hop around if I have to hit cancel so I can get out of that state and start the video. And so that we could jump around in the video, and has this transcript over here to pop over to that point in the timestamp. It's also a video player tag, which can work on any website. So our whole editor is actually built out of web components. And so I'm happy to announce that after months of review process, mostly I got delayed in actually just getting it up there and putting some final touches on it. We now have a WordPress plugin. So we have HAX the Web, which is up on WordPress.org. It is among what I hope is a growing movement of things tagged Disable Gutenberg. I'm keeping it very PG for the show that it says Disable Gutenberg. That's wonderful. But what you do is you enable the classic editor, and then I've got a test bed up here. And so this is my WordPress site, which is now running the HAX editor. And as of last week, we've got much deeper integration with the WordPress media engine. So like I could take a media asset from my WordPress site, drop it in context, or I could upload a new file. I, for whatever reason, have lots of pictures of birds recently. Upload a file, and there's a picture of my backyard. So hit save. That's in the page. If I were to view this page, in the context of my theme, you'll see there's my media because it's responsive, it's not big enough. So I've got, this is, you know, just a test bed page, but there's all kind of design assets and they work in any system we write it for. So we just make HAX work for the web. And as a result, the content can kind of move everywhere. So now you can get that plugin directly through WordPress. We've also got it in Drupal, Grav CMS, Backdrop, a couple other CMSs as well. It's really easy to get integrated. And Andrew has started messing with this in a libraries context as well to put some information online with custom web components that we've shown on past episodes. So we'll have to throw some of those in the chat. However, the thing I wanted to quickly show, because this is a deeper dive code review, is there's an aspect of Gutenberg that I really liked, and it has to do with, it has a mini map. And so I'm gonna have to fake some of this because this is work in progress for sure. I only started on it a little bit before our show. But so the mini map would be a button, and using the, as Nikki will love, using the BTO Pro rule of UI design, anything that's in a modal is undesigned. And so view page source is undesigned. However, this is the source of what this document is. And so that's really useful when you're saving to a database or when you're copying and pasting someone's work or, you know, needing to get into very specific, right? And I could just write like class stuff and I know HTML. But there's this button here that says HAX Schema. And so HAX Schema, let me put this in a VS Code editor window. HAX Schema takes that content that's there and gives you a JSON-based representation of it. So a HAX Schema item that we use is just a very basic breakdown of tag, properties, and then splitting out, right? So that was magazine cover that has an image, and then content. And this might actually get tweaked a little bit based on conversations Nikki and I had on this show last week, where she was asking for that to be expanded so it could support multiple slots, but we're not going to get in the weeds of that. So the big deal is that HAX is able to take this material that is in this area here and convert it to a format that is data driven. Well, Gutenberg does this neat thing where there's a button you can click and it gives you like the order of the concept of the tags. So it's not HTML, it's like a representation of what the things are in order so you could jump through them. Now, I don't have this map button wired up fully because I didn't have enough time, but it is, what's it called? It's called HAX Map. There we go. So I can force it to be open programmatically. So HAX Map, if I say opened, I think, there it is, okay. So if I force HAX Map to be open in this case, the HAX Map is a little tiny descriptive representation of every item in order, in the order it is. So think of like a mini map, that if you had a really, really long piece of content that I could know, oh, you know what, there's these headings on here. And I'm sure Nikki immediately is gonna say, wow, if you have headings listed this way, we could easily discover heading hierarchy accessibility issues.
Yes. Because then we can put a relative heading in, and from now on, heading hierarchy is a no-brainer. Yay, you're my best friend.
So, so I'm thinking, and again, like part of why we do this show is to hash out these ideas in the open so that we can see what everybody is up to. I don't know design-wise where this would go. I think in Gutenberg, there's a little button and it actually pops down a little like overlay that says like, what do you want to go to? So that when you click these, you can actually jump to that item. I don't have the click and jump to the item in working just yet, but I did want to show very quickly what that map does. And I knew Nikki would immediately freak out about that.
Oh my God, yeah.
So the dialogue, which it even shows that I ripped it from something else. HAX Map, there we go. The dialogue in this case that I need to clean up is extending from our simple colors library, which is the way that we do unified colors. I don't entirely have a reason to do that yet, but I assume there's going to be some color coding in there probably. This is definitely something we're going to have as a student project coming up soon, or I really am going to need Nikki to throw ideas at the wall about what this design looks like, because I think it could be really useful. So then we've got some of our CSS styles in there. Big deal with web components. If you're new to the idea is that all this CSS is only applied to the thing that we're working on. And so then I've got an element list, and I've got my title, which is that this is a content map. So all of the real heavy lifting happens. Here we go. So in the page, when this is rendered, right, and it's just a bulleted list, what that ends up looking like is I've got a dialog box that opens. In the dialog box, I've got the little icon map, close button, and then I've got a ordered list, or sorry, unordered list, that walks through the elements, and you can use this .map operator. So go through the array, .map. This is going to give me access to every one of the elements. And then for each element found, I'm going to return an HTML list item that is an icon and the element name. Now, I'll probably have to do something else with this to make sure that it gets like the hierarchy in case there's a parent, right? So I know when to nest this information. At the same time, I don't know how much I really want to nest that information visually. You know, nesting would be the example of, let's say that I'm on this, where's my other, there it is. I'm on this item and I go, oh, well, that's a column. And then I move this in here. So there's technically a grid plate there, and that has these items inside of it. I don't know how critical that is I actually visualize that, but it's at least something worth thinking about. So let me see if I can make this not be opened and then tell it to be opened again if it'll show up. Oh, there it is, okay. Oh, cool. So because that changed, right, I moved that around in the page. Now it shows a grid plate after a task list, right? And there's the task list and there's the grid plate. So right now it's only doing one level of hierarchy, which honestly is probably fine. You're not going to get huge hierarchies with the way that you build this material anyway. But I do like the idea that it is giving you information about all these complex types that are in the page. So the way I build that list out, as far as element list, is when open changes, right? So I clicked, you know, I set opened forcibly, right? We'll tie it into state management later, but when open changed, there's this life cycle that you get in lit element called updated. And updated is going to be notified anytime a property changes. So you'll get this loop of, hey, go through all the properties that have changed. If the property that's changed is called opened, then run my logic here. So first what I do is we have some calls internal to HAX that say, hey, give me the active body and turn it into content. So this is going to take the active body area of the page in HAX and turn it into content in a safe way, like a sanitized way. Then I'm going to take that content and convert that content into HAX elements, quote unquote, which is the thing I showed before, is schema, where you've got the tag name and the properties. Then we're going to loop through each of those items in the list, and we are going to pull out what's called a gizmo definition. Now, I believe this should be printing lots of debug statements as I was messing with this. But what a gizmo definition ends up looking like is, this is more or less the element on the page teaching HAX how to work with it. And so we can remix that information and visualize it in different ways. So part of it is it says gizmo and then title. So there's where cover image comes from. And there is icon, and that's where icon comes from. So we're able to pull those two pieces off of the element reporting how to visualize it. And then we build a new array and we push this as a new object onto it. So that's going to later give us each object as whatever.icon and whatever.name. And this is a little weird, but this is kind of it's a hack in lit element to get the DOM to repaint every time safely. So you take your value, which this .element list is array, and then you do a spread operator, which is in JavaScript, that's more or less the equivalent of doing like elements 0 and then elements 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. how it differs is that it's going to trigger this element list to wipe out its previous values and paint the new ones in. So you could just leave it like this. However, when I made that change in the page, it wouldn't have been accurately reflected. And so because of, it just has to do with the complexities of arrays. So that's where I got to with this map thing. Does anyone have any ideas on what I could do this, expand it, maybe where it should show up? How I could use relative heading by Nikki? Anything?
Well, I look at that for data migration. And there is something I have that you are just like totally setting us up for later.
Which is?
I'm going to be mysterious until it's my
You're
turn.
gonna be mysterious until it's your turn.
Yes. You know, build a suspense.
Wonderful.
I feel like Nikki needed to start heavy breathing there to build the suspense appropriately.
Yes.
Building suspense.
Weirdo.
What could it be?
So I've had an issue in the queue for that to build a mini map for a long time, but as we're getting better and better at data and the suspense Nikki is referring to, that it's half baked, but it took like 15 minutes to build. So we're getting a lot more bang for our buck on these elements now as we keep building more and more abstract things. So I'm really interested to use, Nikki, I think your absolute positioning behavior.
Yes.
Of it, right? So I was thinking you'd click the map and it would actually just show you the map floating down almost as a tooltip or something that you could scroll through.
That makes sense.
That seem reasonable?
Possibly.
Okay.
I like to play with things and then tear them apart and then I didn't like it that way, completely gut them and then go back in, try something else, then go back to the original way, but slightly varied. That's my MO.
Well, that's what I was going to play with as the next thing. So hopefully your demos and examples are extremely well documented, as they always are. So, all right, Rob, I think you're up next if you're ready to screen share.
Yeah, good to go. Let me know if you want me to zoom in. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, did that show up?
Yep.
And I can zoom in if that's small. This is a 1440p screen.
It is super small. Please zoom in
Yeah,
for
you
the
probably
old
should do
people
that.
who have bad eyes. Thank you.
You're not an old people. You don't get to say that yet.
Don't worry, I
I'm
have a
old
4K
soul.
TV over to my left. Okay, so anyways, first I'll introduce myself for those that don't know me. My name is Robert Sonletter. I go by Rob. And how I know about Brian is I was in his IST 402 class last fall. That was a very unique class. Glad I took that one if I must be blatantly honest.
Oh, stop it.
So anyways, what I've been exploring is methods of making test automation for the web components. And first I revisited what I did in my first internship, which was using Selenium through Visual Studio. So on screen here's my code that I made. It's a very simple test automation script that I made. So it's more so I'm just sharing the idea of how I did it at my first internship. So first off, I'm using the NUnit framework, OpenQA, Selenium, and also .chrome. And the test URL I'm going to be using is elmsln.org. So what this is doing here is defining the driver that's going to be the thing that controls my browser when I execute this test. And as my script starts, it'll open up a new instance of Google Chrome, maximize the window, and then go to the test URL, which is elmsln.org. And it'll interact with some of the HTML elements on screen using a thing called XPath. I'm sure Brian loves XPath.
Oh, I'm a huge fan, yeah.
So all it's doing is going to elmsln.org, checking that it's on the screen or the home screen by looking for the presentations /latest videos text. I will go there. It's this text right here it'll be looking for. And then after that, it will click here to go to examples, and then it will check that this is displayed on screen. So I will go ahead and run the test. I've already tried it, and it should just execute right through. So I'm not touching the keyboard. There is my test automation browser. So it landed on the home screen. Now it's at examples. It checked, it went back to home, and then it just closes and passes. So a very simple script, but this is the idea of how I used it. I'm exploring other ways of testing. I mentioned before we started that a lot of them aren't working properly yet. That's potentially for a different reason, but I'm going to be troubleshooting that after I'm off of here. But this is the idea, is that it's going to be opening the browser, searching for so-and-so element. Any questions about that?
So does it require a live web server? Or I suppose this could just open up and run against a local.
Yeah, it can use, I believe it can use a like localhost 8080 or anything on those lines. Because I think I saw some of the other people at my internship using that for testing this way.
So, and then I guess my next question would be, is this something you could throw into like a Jenkins or a GitHub hooks or some CI, Circle CI, something like that, Travis?
Jenkins, I know, would do it because at my second internship, that's how we ran our test automation. I believe similar scripts to this were running on those daily.
And so then you're basically, because what we're looking for is something like this set up automatically per element we're working on, and with at least enough hello world, that it's like a did it load, and then some reasonable documentation via comments as to how other people could extend each one, and then we could loop through and run it against all of them. And the other thought I had, Nikki, or anyone for that matter, would be we point something like this at Storybook and how we could interface with Storybook somehow.
Are you using schema at all to influence your web components, out of curiosity? Like, you remember like a while back we were talking about how like Pattern for Elements has like each component has a schema that describes what slots and attributes are available?
We currently have the custom elements.json. I don't even know what to call that, but like schema generator analyzer thing. I don't know what to call it, but yeah, we do generate a file that has probably something somewhat similar to that.
I'm just wondering if you could use that to auto-inform a test suite so that the test suite can read in your schema and then kind of auto-generate tests based on that data. So it could say like, okay, here's the 5 attributes that are supported by this web component. Here are the valid inputs for those attributes. It's Boolean, it's a string, it's got an enum, whatever. And then it tests each one to make sure that it works. You might have to define success for some of those, but you could do that maybe in a testing file somewhere that's just a definition of what does success mean for this attribute being set. And then if you do any slot work, like you could test that if I put something in a slot by this name, does it render?
That is kind of like what I would be testing for at that first internship. Like we'd put a value in a table and then we'd see, will it show the value on the screen or something on those lines?
Are you digging into the shadow DOM to do that? Like you're going in and just making sure that that content goes into the correct shadow slot, or?
Currently, no, we haven't done anything with that. I have been concerned that not all test runners can actually handle shadow DOM, so that's been a bit of a how do we deal with this? Because I'm just starting to see some libraries support it.
Yeah, if you guys played with the web component tester suite, it's like web component tester browser.js.
No.
Okay, I could show something like that if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be.
We have that set up. It
Yeah.
does not do visual, which sucks.
As far as how schema goes for us, one of the things that I was playing with Storybook is, having some sort of a story schema. Some of it either pulled from the HAX schema that Brian showed, and some of it kind of building its own based on what the properties were of the tag definition and trying to guess at those. But
yeah, I'm a big fan of single source of truth. So like you can query your web component and get it to tell you about itself instead of having to like keep the information in multiple places, then it's always awesome. So like for our storybook, I mean, you and I have like shared a lot of like code between each other of storybook stuff. I love checking that out last week, actually. It was really fun. But for like utilities, since we have schema, we register our schema with the web component, and then the storybook can just query for properties off of the web component, and the web component says like, I have a color attribute, and that color attribute can have these 5 values that are valid. And then our storybook just creates a drop down based on that information that has those values in it.
That's essentially what I've been doing with the stuff that's using the HAX schema. So yay. And it would technically take, technically, given that the form elements that I have are also doing the JSON schema, I have ways of converting that. So if the stuff didn't have a HAX schema but was using the JSON schema, then I could probably do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing, like tying us back to the automated testing that you're working on. That's the cool thing about having like something that is communicated between, like, you can have the same information in Storybook, and then your automated test suite reads that same information, and your web component understands that same information, like all of those values kind of shared among things, so that if you need to make an update, you're just having to do it in one place instead of having to do it in 3 places, because inevitably I will miss one and everything will break.
Well, and his map, as he's been demoing the map, I've been thinking about the implications that has for converting things across different schemas, not just the page, the page tags themselves, but from one type of schema to another. So I am super excited about all of this stuff coming together.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea, Cassandra. I hadn't thought of the leveraging the custom elements.json schema set to, even if it's, because my main initial concern is like, let's get a will it blend test. And then it's like, okay, where can we go from there? And if it's, that is going to kick out slot names, like you said, and it should have some typed data as far as like, this property is a Boolean, this one's an array. So even if we, Nikki, I think maybe if we had like a random series of like, here's some example arrays and here's some example strings and stuff like that.
I do have some randoms in Storybook utils. I have one that'll generate a random object if it knows what sort of things to put into the object.
Very cool.
Awesome. Paul also mentioned in the chat using Cypress. I don't know if you wanted to chime in about that, Paul. We are recording, but if anyone has experience with Cypress,
I've heard of it.
It's cypress.io. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
It's Paul. Yeah, I mean, Selenium definitely shows its age at this point and it's kind of complicated to run and has some pretty bad APIs around it that you can find some good wrappers. Cypress just is a much more modern end-to-end testing solution. Also, from what you guys were asking about running this in CI, yeah, you can run this all in CI, GitHub Actions. There's a couple of great patterns if you Google around for just running your Cypress tests directly against your Storybook, and you've got that all happening nicely. You can even do like negative testing in Storybook with stuff expected to fail and all kinds of good stuff. So highly recommend just stop with Selenium and use Cypress is my like modern take on ETETS testing these days.
What coding language is Cypress? Is that JavaScript?
It's JavaScript, yeah. That's one of the big pluses as well. And you can swap out a lot of the other browsers that it drives. So you've got a wider range of browser integrations you can plug in.
Nice. Do you know if it, sorry, I'm like querying you about it. I could look it up, but I was just wondering if you knew if it had like a human readable syntax library like Mocha Chai does. Like you can do like expect it to equal blah blah blah, so that it's a little more like clear to parse what you're looking at?
I mean, you can write it a number of different ways. You can integrate it with Mocha, Jest. We're usually using Jest to automate a lot of that stuff. So you can do it a couple different ways.
Awesome.
Also, just question, well, Happy's totally new to this, never seen any of your stuff before, so kind of cool to take a look. Are you guys using Stencil.js at all to do web component compilation?
No, we've reviewed it previously. I personally hate TypeScript with the burning of 1,000 suns.
Oh, I'll fight you on that one.
It's got to be native. It's very native. But
There's no such thing as native, though.
We are not using Stencil at the moment. Why, you have positive experience with Stencil?
Oh yeah, we've got Stencil for a number of things. We also use React components compiled with Stencil to pure web components and stuff like that. I've got a developer on my team who's done quite a lot of interesting work around that. Might be interesting to share at some point. But
yeah,
I mean, we love TypeScript for background too. I think JavaScript's not a language, but you know, that's a fight for another day. But yeah, I mean, I think Stencil is fantastic. It lets you, because then also you can write and leverage a whole other ecosystem of better testing of components written in React and other things where you can test, you know, with the Shadow DOM React testing library, pull that all in, test it with Cypress, know that it works in isolation, compile it out, have a nice build chain around that.
cool. Yeah, I bring them on sometime. Totally want to see talks around Stencil. We haven't done any topics on Stencil previously, so I'd be very interested to see that.
Cool. Yeah. Again, interesting to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we went the like similar to y'all. Like we went a super like light. We wrote our own base class, not lit element, not Stencil, no anything. Just kind of like our own very small little base class, and that's it. We extend that.
Okay.
All right. Who did we have up next? Sarah, I think it was you.
Sounds good. Okay.
Speaking of React.
Yeah, that was a good lead-in. Okay, so just to kind of show you guys what the app is in its current phase, it's pure React. I mean, yeah, I'm just using React because for context, I am a computer science student and I am the only developer really on my team at the moment. So I'm not like, as an intern, I'm kind of learning as I go. So basically it allows an instructional designer or a faculty member to come in and put in some basic information about some activities they're going to have in an online class. And as they fill out the different types of activities, they get to see some of the data coming in at the right so that they can kind of see how they're balancing their class load based on different types of activities and the recommended hours that are, you know, preferred for FIA and such. So it's not too robust yet, but I'm pretty proud of it. It's going to, the main goals include allowing like the components to be removable and repeatable and all that sort of stuff, and just kind of trying to make it as robust as possible to actually customize it for a specific class. I don't know how in-depth you want me to go on this.
No, I mean, as in-depth as you want. I mean, this is however you would like to showcase. I'm super interested in this. We've talked about doing something along these lines for, you know, the better part of a decade, and then nobody actually picks it up and runs with it. So
Oh, okay.
Seeing someone actually build this planning tool is fascinating.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it came out of the idea from Rice. They have a basic estimator tool, and it's really not a planning tool. It just has like writing, reading, that sort of a thing. So I just kind of took the whole PSU documentation, which is just a whole bunch of tables and Excel documents on how to measure all these things. I'm trying to make it as customizable as possible. I want to extend, right now we just have a basic custom activity, but I'd like to extend that so that it works in any of the categories. We're talking about possibly logging some of the data we get from this so we can see like what people are putting in for extra activities, what they're naming it, what it would be sort of classified as, get some data on what people are doing in their classes. I know that you had mentioned in the Slack chat earlier the idea of making it into a full class planner, and that is, it's kind of like being side talked about. This is what we got kind of like, from what I understand, what my department got permission to do so far is this, but we're kind of open to letting it grow a lot further. So.
So the reason I call it I called it a planner, and you, or did I forget? I called it something, and you called it a planner.
Yeah, it's an estimator in the sense that it's made, yeah, we're trying to keep it straight to estimator, but I feel like it's going to end up going beyond that, because it seems to be the feedback I'm getting that people want is more of a planner like what you're talking about.
Yeah, so and I might just be mixing language, but what we've discussed before being like a holy grail type of thing to starting an instructional exercise and planning out a new course would be, okay, so we've got these estimators, and then once we've adjusted these levels with faculty and maybe have this as a shareable file almost that they can kind of review and tweak, that then when we have agreed upon it, that you can start to build a scaffolded syllabus, you can set up systems and technology that go and meet these instructional objectives rather rapidly if you have the right hooks, like almost using it as going from estimator to planning tool to deployment. And that's obviously not going to do everything, but I think it would help connect faculty to, hey, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. And then, oh, there are technical implications if we're doing, I mean, in our context, an online course. So
yeah, that's a little bit of, I'm kind of trying to create a balance with that. Like I want to do in the downloader print results, it's basically just a save to PDF of everything that's being used. It's not working yet. I'm still coding it up. But what our idea is, we want to implement certain things like, this doesn't tell you much. So if you have like, even if the faculty member is playing with this and they say, well, I want to do a problem solving scenario, I don't want to clutter this with a ton of information about what that would be. But things like that, or linking to external documentation to also give ideas about how that could be implemented, are kind of like some of the things that my team is bouncing back and forth, so that when you download or print results, or possibly I might do a JSON thing where like you can basically save the state of this and send it to somebody. You could potentially have a lot more planning information, so that this could be, like, as you were saying, like this could be the first step of a quick build to kind of look at things and then understand how to implement the activities and stuff like that.
yeah, or so I love the JSON idea. If you could almost, have you used PuffPit before?
No.
It's so hard to pronounce a stupid thing. It's like PHPUT or something. It's PuffPit. It's Puppet with PHP in the middle, but
Okay.
it's got this nice UI from a coding perspective of like, hey, what packages are in this and libraries, and then you can hit download and it gives you a YAML file. So then you can take those settings with you and drag and drop them back in, and it pre-populates everything.
Oh, nice.
So I don't mean specifically using that, just like that paradigm is super appealing. Luann has a question in the chat. Are you sharing this out for use by other institutions when it's fully baked?
Yes, that is the plan. It's going to be on the PSU web learning site, and I believe we're going to be, I think my boss has already been kind of like letting other institutions that she knows, like people at other institutions, know about it. So we're hoping to get it live before fall semester.
Very cool. So could you, on the PDF thing, were you planning to do that with React or with something else?
I just started looking into it today. I am open to suggestions. Right now, I was just using, like, I was playing around with, what's it called? I was using JS PDF just to see what I can do with that for now. But this is new to me. I've never done JavaScript coding before this internship, so I'm open to suggestions.
I mean, is your code up on a repo somewhere, or like, did you already post the link?
No, I don't have a public repo.
Okay. then I'm
I-
not sure how many how many good suggestions. Like,
That's fair enough.
like I would love to go look and then attempt feedback. Of course, I'd have to run it by Brian first, to, but,
Yeah. I mean, I could circle around. I need to, I think, get permissions before actually sharing the stuff I'm working on beyond this demo, because it is still technically like I'm just the intern. But I'm willing to put it up there and get some feedback, because I'm just like, the way that I'm doing it, so I don't know how familiar you guys are with React, but I'm kind of balancing the fact that my other coworkers are not coders, and I want to make this in a way that I can document it where they can add or remove an activity profile based on if something needs to be added. So I've kind of tried to block it out. So like, this is not the most efficient way I could probably do it, but I'm trying to keep everything contained into a specific like React component class. And then each one of those can be generated however many times it needs to. And then it handles its own calculations, because the calculations for each specific activity vary for how many hours or minutes or whatever goes to the activity. So the way that I'm doing it, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but like from a coding aspect, I'm just trying to keep them all separated so that this is basically all that the person is going to need to change, and try to separate it out so they know what they need to change for non-coders. But yeah, I can get this up into repo maybe by next week. Let's see.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I will gladly harass William in any way that you need to get this code up in a repo so that we can, check it out and bang on it. I mean, I'd love to have some of these UI elements be driven by web components, even just for my own seeing, like, okay, how do these things play together? Because I've heard that they can be mixed at times.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, okay, I don't see why not, but yeah, I definitely want to make sure we get permission. I know William kind of like okayed this little demo, so he's my fall guy at the moment, because my boss is off today. So, okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll stop sharing. So I think that, unless anybody else has any questions, that's kind of.
So Mike threw in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh, I lost
it.
There we go. The chat disappeared when I started sharing. Thank you.
Hey, Sarah, that looks awesome. Yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do is break out some of those little services, like generating a PDF into a functions as a service.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to keep everything open source. We're trying to use a project that's called OpenFOSS, which allows you to easily create and manage little functions as a service that you can write in any language. It's really as long as it can be run in Docker, which anything can, and respond over HTTP, it can be turned into a function. So this PDF generator service was one that I'm working on. I haven't played with it in a while, but I think it works. The core of it at least works. So it uses Puppeteer, which is like Selenium, and it's you just basically give it a URL, a public URL, and it takes a snapshot of it and puts it into a PDF for you.
That is very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh gosh, Mike, Sarah, please don't share that with the government space, because then they're going to create like 90 million PDFs and it's going to be a nightmare.
Does your service work, Mike?
It does. So the only thing that doesn't work in this fully is how it saves the PDF. I'm trying to use a bucket service called Mineo to store the files, so it would just send you a link to download. That's the only thing I don't have quite working yet, but it actually does take the PDFs and combines them into, so you can give it a bunch of different URLs and it'll send you back one PDF. Nice.
All right, that's for a later point in time. And then, well, because Rob showed on the one episode, Rob showed his class project that we, helped influence them on with Pandoc and being able to convert anything to anything more or less. So that would be a good follow-up at a later point in time from that. Yeah. That'll be for episode 11, Potter. Now you're on the docket. So I think, all right.
Could I show, I took Sarah's, while we were talking, I took Sarah's code and I put it into HAX 11D. I don't know if.
Oh, yeah. We were going to use that
I'll just show it real quick because Sarah, you were talking about it'd be great to be able to hand this over to people so that they could add their own elements. So I stole your code pen real quick and I put it on a HAX 11D project. And what HAX 11D is it's using 11D, which is the static site generator, and it has our HAX editor overlaid onto it, so that you can use HAX, which is a visual editor, to actually save physical files to your static sites.
Why is that different from HAX CMS?
So HAX CMS actually uses all web components. The whole thing is web component driven. And you are actually, it's not building out static pages. Well, yeah, it kind of is. It is saving static pages. But that is a PHP-based server, so you actually have to have a server running whenever you're editing it. This is, it's the same, it's very similar, but this one is Node.js based. And it's just like it's a different flavor of implementation, I guess I would say, to HAX CMS. So very similar, but you can use this in Node.js and yeah. So
HAX CMS is also a single page app, so you have to be a much more elite JavaScript developer, I'd say, to get in. You can't just like stumble into it and start making a theme. In the same way as with HAX 11D, you can leverage all of our tags and write pretty vanilla HTML and JavaScript for that matter, and build a static site that is multiple pages pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what we have is, I broke just not this section down here, but just the header information. I wrapped that in the HAX editor. And whenever I say I wrapped it in the HAX editor, I took the content out. And so now 11D is sort of managing content in separate files here. So it's not quite static anymore. And it's going to run through this template. And the only thing different about this template is that we're wrapping the 11D HAX tag around it. So this will say, if I'm in edit mode, I'm going to I'm going to show the HAX editor and wrap the editing functionality around everything that shows up in this content block. So everything that's in the content block is this chunk of HTML. So this was literally just copied and pasted from CodePen. I haven't changed anything. The only thing different is I'm wrapping this new 11D HAX tag around it. So whenever I visit the page, if I refresh, I get this edit content button that shows up at the very top. If I click that, then this whole area, this whole section becomes editable.
Oh my God, that's so freaking cool.
Yeah, so you could, this is a new block.
Point out you just did this in was this just like 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Freaking cool.
We're getting exponential gains.
So you hit save, that updates this file here. So you can say this is the new block. So that's the new paragraph tag that was added all through the front end, as well as added some text onto there. So you can imagine if we turned these little cards into their own web components and wired those up to HAX, then you would be able to give editors the ability to add those through the HAX interface, which would be which would be pretty powerful, I think.
That would be really interesting. I'd have to figure, do you have any ideas of how you'd be able to like work with the form info in that case then? Because I'm having, like, you have to be able to dynamically get the numbers back from what's entered into one of the boxes.
So I'm just trying to think of.
In React, I am not specifically sure as to how you do that. Now, Nikki has some interesting ways that we achieve that with simple fields, in which we've got a form that doesn't actually know what all of its fields are, and then she more or less uses it. Correct me, Nikki, please chime in. You use events in order to pull back a schema out of it, right? As to what the answers are. You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, so it's actually, yeah, it's listening. It creates the fields on the fly and then monitors them for changes and then provides that back as JSON.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's on some past episodes, but I am happy to, you know, at some point walk you through it, you know, one-on-one if you ever need it.
Yeah, cool. I'll have to check out some of the past episodes. I just found out about this thing like a week ago, so.
Yeah, well, welcome.
So Nikki, you're saying that we should do HAX wiring for simple fields, individual form fields, and then build a form builder. That's what you're saying?
Oh, Jesus Christ. My head, I had a headache already today, and now my head is going to explode from all this meta ideas within ideas.
But be real, Nikki, that's like every time you interact with Brian, right? Like,
yeah, pretty much.
We do what we can. All right, so anybody have any other questions or any ideas in that sphere before we move on to the next thing? If not, I'm going to take a detour here for a second. Jamie, are you there? Maybe.
I am. All right.
yay!
Would you be, I mean, I'm not to put you on the spot with this, but would you be willing to show the thing that I know that you have to show that Becca has previously said in episodes, hey, we should really get someone from Smithsonian on here to talk about this cool 3D thing that they've done?
Sure, yeah, I can do that.
Yay!
I can do a quick demo. All right. Oh, disabled participant screen sharing.
Well, Tom, can you give Jamie access? I don't have access to set that for this week for some reason.
Try now.
All right, yep. Okay. So this is our site. It's just 3d.si.edu. Just about I don't know, a few months ago, I guess the end of February, we launched an open access project where we made about 2,000 digital assets open access. And as part of that, we launched our Voyager browser or Voyager viewer, which is built as a web component. So fundamentally at the core, it's using Three.js for the rendering of the objects, but we built some layers on top. We have some different functionality, annotations, so you can add annotations to your object that give you extra information about it. You can add additional information through articles that can either overlay or they can show to the right of the object. And then we have tours. So you can step through different configurations of, you know, the camera view of the object and different content. And we actually have a whole different, excuse me, UI for this component, which we call this one Voyager Explorer, and we call the backend UI Voyager Story. So we have a different UI. It's the same component, but different UI that we can use to set all this information up. So it has tools to, for instance, like add the annotations by just clicking on the surface. Actually, I could probably show that too. Let's see.
This is nuts already. I know Potter is like, why am I also building this Bones thing right now? Because I know he's been working on this mock-up thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Why, guys? I sent you the repo. Like,
yeah, but you didn't tell me it was this cool.
I did too.
No.
I sent you a link to the Tyrannosaurus Rex that was like all 3D.
Yeah, why can't you trust her?
Because I'm a woman. It's come to that.
Stop it, everyone. All right, back on track.
So yeah, this is our backend UI where, for instance, like, so I've got annotations, but this has a taskbar. So these are typical tasks when we have a new object that we want to add to the collection. So you can pose it, and if it's not like centered or it's not axis aligned, we can pose it there, because most of our stuff comes from 3D capture data. So it could be oriented like all crazy, and we want it to be kind of uniform for presentation purposes. Then we have derivatives. So those are different quality models, because, you know, we want to support being able to load on mobile, lower res version versus, you know, high res to get all the detail. For annotations, this one already has a ton, but what I was talking about a minute ago is, say we want to zoom in here and like add a new annotation, we can just click create and then click on the object, and it points to that point that you clicked on. And then we can, you can just change the name of it. You can change the style of it. Yeah, and then articles is your standard, what you see is what you get editor. And tours is a feature that I actually like quite a bit. It's basically snapshots of the state of the viewer. So you can add different steps to the tour, and to make a new step, all you have to do, like if I want to update the first step that we have, is just change your view, open and close your content, turn on whatever annotations you want, and then just click update. And then that'll be the state that's presented to the user when they get to that step in the tour. And then once you set everything up, you click save, and that all goes to a scene descriptor file, which is what that front end component, Voyager Explorer, reads in. And all the content, we actually have a 3D API maintained by a totally different group at the Smithsonian that serves the actual content to the component.
Wait, so how many different places, like different portions in SI use web components right now? Like, I thought it was just a 3D digitization area, or is it more than?
Yeah, I've been with the Smithsonian since the beginning of the year, so I'm not aware of like everything everybody's doing, but
Sure.
Definitely as far as visualization goes, I think we're the only ones that are kind of spearheading that. We do have, like, and this isn't the Smithsonian, but everything we do is open source and on GitHub. So I think the Library of Congress is using Voyager Explorer as well. So they haven't become like a contributor yet, but they have deployed it and they've made a few tweaks. But the API is just a pure API. It's just you know, a backend repository, and then an API that you can pull the data from. But it is also, if you know, other people are working on 3D stuff, it's a public API. So if you wanted to use Smithsonian content for like demos for your tool or whatever you're working on, that's totally doable and available currently.
So cool. Have you seen Google's model viewer?
Yeah, we actually are working with them as well. We have a pilot project we're doing right now with a partner with Model Viewer, and I don't know, I wouldn't call myself active, but I'm a little bit involved with their projects as well, with their community. Yeah, they're doing really cool stuff. Was just in a talk with one of their guys yesterday where he said that their 1.0 release is coming like really soon. So wow, that's super exciting. But yeah, and we actually experimented on our backend since Model Viewer is also just a wrapper on 3JS. I mean, not just, it adds a lot to it, but we experimented with kind of just replacing our rendering component with model viewer, and it worked pretty well. It was nice. We got a few extra features based on what they've implemented. The main thing it was missing is direct access to the scene graph, because we do some modifications of components. Like we have some tools. Let me back out of here. We have some tools that allow you to do things like slice through. Yeah, I don't know. It's not working for me, but you can measure, you can take measurements, you can slice through the objects, and all that requires us having deeper access. And that's something they're working on right now, but it's still very much like beta. So we're looking forward to when that gets a little bit more solid and maybe helping out with it. But yeah, for sure, we like Model Viewer a lot. we actually gave our partner the option between Voyager and Model Viewer, and they chose Model Viewer. So that made my heart sink a little bit, but it's fun because we get to work with, you know, a little bit of a different version, and yeah, and talk with those guys a little bit more. So yeah, for sure.
This editor is insane. It's crazy.
And that's one thing, actually, when we did a demo for them, and they kind of geeked out on our editor, because that's something that they haven't done yet, but is definitely on their roadmap. So I think they got a few ideas from us as well, as far as that goes.
And in terms of like open publishing, as the theme is today, everything that you're talking about, jeez, stop, robocalls. Everything that you're talking about, it boils down to flat files, right? So, you know, the model, the description file that you're doing the tour, that all saves down to a file. So that can be published in a zip file.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been working on this for the past 3 weeks, so I'm glad I can pack up.
Our work here is done.
Yeah. Yeah, I was working on a little annotation thing for the model viewer tag, but this is beyond. This is
Next
crazy.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is this whole editor we're seeing, is this built in web components as well?
Yeah. It's actually, I mean,
What?
it's essentially one big web component. It's a different UI essentially. This central component, the visualizer here, this is Voyager Explorer, so it's the same thing that you get if you go to the website. It's just embedded in some other UI that allows us to make those updates and changes.
And does this require a backend, or can this just run static, pass a file through it, and then download it?
Yeah, it can run, you know, as long as you've got Node available. I mean, it can run. It doesn't require anything other than, I mean, currently it requires our scene descriptor file format, but we're working to try to generalize that a little bit more. So you could just, within this editor, you could, you know, set up your, like currently we're using GLB for our model format. You could drop in your GLBs and then generate one of our scene descriptor files through this UI. Right now we have, which is a whole nother story, but we have a whole nother tool that we use to automate our 3D content workflow. So it takes like capture data and optimizes it and generates different levels of GLB and other formats and stuff like that. And part of that pipeline is generating the descriptor file currently. So that bit of it is a little bit inaccessible. But yeah, like I said, we're working to change that.
Yeah, because this, so you showed it was in a Drupal site previously.
Yep.
Is that just for your own management of the different files in the end?
The other site is our public site. It's 3d.si.edu. So we have a search interface. You can, you know, look for whatever, like you can type in Lincoln and you'll get, like, I think we got 4 or 5 Abraham Lincoln models. There's about 2,000 models on there currently. That we like to say that because it sounds impressive, but unfortunately about like 1,900 of them are bones. So unless you're super interested in bones, we've got about 150 or 200 models that are, you know, cool things from like the Air and Space Museum and the Natural History Museum and American History Museum.
I'm trying to convince them to come present at GovCon, even though it's going to be virtual. I still want them to do it.
I can see why.
Yeah, right?
I mean,
Mind-blowing.
People's jaws would drop.
Right?
I immediately went to Potter. How do we put this in a Docker container? And then how do you add them? We make a component on top of this that is HAX invoking the container to spin up and run this so that you can just embed these in pages and things.
Yep,
It's
absolutely.
like it already has a Docker compose.
Oh, it does? Oh, I'll have it to you by tomorrow then.
You'll have it to you by the end of the next chat. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is really amazing. This is even more amazing than I thought it would be. Oh. Yeah.
Mike asked what the viewer is written in. It's 3JS, right?
The renderer is 3JS. The top level like UI stuff is TypeScript.
There's
Nice.
that word again. Awesome.
Sick.
So that's why I said that we needed to inject a detour.
I appreciate the detour.
Because I had heard from a one little Becca that you were here, Jamie, and that you had access to this thing to explain to us. So
Yeah, thanks Becca for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I have no shame. I tagged you guys on Twitter, and I was like, I was talking to Vince this morning about some other stuff, and I was like, yo, you guys should come do this.
so I think
Come back and play with us more.
yeah, you're welcome to come back anytime. So
Yeah, every Friday.
so we've got a half hour left, and Nikki segueing into Cassandra's discussion point, I think is what we had queued up for the end here. So as long as Nikki has screen control.
Oh, I do, because I'm loved. Tom loves me, and he didn't want to give you control.
I understand.
I'm nicer. Okay. So last week, Sonia Woods came in and asked if we had a good solution for some replacement for long description, because long description is deprecated. And she pointed to this particular demo that uses the details and summary tag to provide additional information. And I did my thing where I mentally spin in circles thinking about what's the best way to do this. And one of the things I thought of is this particular piece itself is a component in and of itself, because maybe I don't necessarily need it for just figures and images, but it would be nice to have this polyfill detail summary little widget. So Sonia mentioned it last week, and I broke it up into this little widget, which is very bland, but I super loaded it up with a bunch of CSS variables so that it can be customized. I tried to keep everything in our A11Y dash namespace, things that are as plain as possible and customizable through variables. And then I have other components that use our simple colors that could just, wrap around this with the color styling, but this one would be more universally usable and customizable. The example you see here is the one that uses progressive enhancement and plays around with the idea of finding something that's living in light DOM and grabbing it and dropping it into shadow DOM. So here's the details and the summary. And if you want to add sort of, customizable instead of the summary within the component, there are actually two properties, open text and closed text. So that you can actually replace what's in the summary there based on the open or closed state. And this is the version that just uses simple slots so that you don't have to use details and summary. And so they're both, one of them is more for a use case like we have in HAX, but the other use case is more the traditional progressive enhancement. So I don't know if that's similar to what Cassandra was thinking of as light DOM as data, but let me jump over here. This is still a work in progress. This is alley figure, which uses alley details, and again, it's using the idea of you know, here are all these slots, but we can also do it as here. Let's just wrap it around a figure. So let's grab the figure in light DOM and then drop it in so we can style it. But you know, it was challenging to try to think of, well, how do I want to use this? Who's going to use it? Should it have progressive enhancement? Is this too complex? And you know, now you're getting into all of these little pieces of light DOM that you might want to style. So I am using a mutation observer, actually some tiers of mutation observers. So I have the main observer watching what's slotted, because I have some named slots there for if we're not using progressive enhancement. And it's just watching to see if we have details and summary added. And it will actually kick up a more detailed character data child observer of details if there is a details. And if it gets removed, that observer goes away. So it's you know, monitoring any changes to that slotted space and picking the stuff up from light DOM and dropping it back in to actually more light DOM for those slotted pieces.
Yeah, I think that's critical. Like those mutation observers are what makes that possible.
Yes. And I didn't want to have a bunch of them sitting around there with all of these, like I didn't want to have character data be observed on all of the slots. I just needed it if somebody was using progressive enhancement. So I'm like, why don't I just do this? I'll watch the top layer for if the progressive element's there. And then if it is, continue to watch it. Because I also didn't want to grab the element and move it. I need to clone it because otherwise I'm going to have to filter through all of those changes. And so, yeah, I sat around in circles. I told Sonia, oh, this will be easy. And then I nickified it and just kept overthinking it until I got to this point. I do
end up with a great product, nickifying it.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
see,
she made her own verb, like you guys.
I have my own, I do have my own idiolect. So, so yeah, like I ended up circling and circling around it, and that's sort of what I've gotten to do. It's up on the LRN Web Components mono repo. It's alley details, and then alley figure I'm still working on. But the idea being that these are all tiny little pieces that we can stack within each other. I did want to show one more thing related to metadata though, because these two stories are being done, well, here's the HAX data. So Brian had mentioned this HAX demo schema, or the HAX schema that teaches it how to interact with HAX, but he's also created this piece called demo schema that he's using elsewhere. And I thought, well, if we've already got that data, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to rewrite that for Storybook? So in my Storybook utilities, I can now take my alley details story, and that's a more detailed one. This particular one-liner though, this alley details story is basically just grabbing it from the HAX demo and saying, hey, by the way, create all these knobs based on this story. And because I do things in a very scaffolded way, I also, if I'm not making it from the HAX stuff, I can say, hey, take a look at this particular class, find out what its properties are. These are the default values I want to set for it. Here are some things that aren't defined in any schema or properties anywhere else, but I want them as knobs. And here are two that I didn't want to expose as knobs. So because I'm thinking in like 50 dimensions of how I might want to use a thing from the easiest way to the most complex nickified way, all of that lives in Storybook Utils. I forgot to pull that one up. but we've seen this before. I've just added more to it. So all of that lives in Storybook utils. So make element from class, make element from HAX demo is checking out what all's in there. And then I also have my make element, which allows some other customization. And we have the other thing I wanted to show. I have a couple of random things in here, like get random number for my things, get random option. I'm going to give you an array of what the options might be from the HAX data and just randomly load one. I have sort of get random image, so I don't have to pack them all up, get random hex code, get a random color from simple colors, which I showed before, and get random array. And I think I have a get random object, which if you gave it a whole object and just said, hey, look at this and make everything random, it could just generate randoms.
Oh, nice. We could definitely rope that in with the testing engine then.
Yeah, so that's about half of what I did this week. And I really want to see what Cassandra's done. So if there aren't any questions, I will stop sharing.
I feel like you're my code sister.
I feel like that too. Yay. It's like parallel lives and I want to learn and then we can merge and become all powerful and take over the world.
Seriously.
So Nikki, are you planning to have a wrapper on top of that Ali summary thing so that you just define like an image and those inputs and it generates the stuff in the middle?
So it's Ali figure wraps around Ali details. So you can drop Ali details into Ali figure, or you can provide all of that and it would still use Ali details. The reason why is maybe we want to use details for things other than images. Or maybe we want to have details within details, like in that demo that Sonia gave us.
Cool. So then we'll have to wire it into the HAX progressive enhancement thing and it'll generate that stuff. Right?
And now my head is going to explode.
Cassandra, did you have something you wanted to show as the dovetail of that with the data thing?
Sure. This is not code that I have written as a corollary. This is, I know. I'm representing the team. I'm repping. All right. So let's see. How can I, one participant can share at a time. Can I share my screen? Do I have permission? I do. Oh, that's exciting. Okay. So this is code that Kyle Buchanan has written. He is awesome. He was working on PFE button and I'm trying to remember what he said about this, but basically we've tried to extend the like HTML button object and with our base class and it just doesn't work. So he wanted to find a way to make semantic button like move into the shadow DOM basically so that we can style it easier. So he kind of to add to what Nikki did, it's basically driven by mutation observers, but he added this really cool concept of like blacklisted attributes because what he's doing is cloning the object and moving it into the shadow DOM, but we don't want to bring everything over because if you've got an inline style tag, for example, like forget that, you don't get that, go away. So and there's going to be other little things that depending on what you're doing, you might not want to allow an ID or you might not want to allow, I don't know, source or something. I don't know. So you could have this idea of like a blacklisted set of attributes. And we talked about maybe moving this into the global base class of, we have a PF element base class. We talked about maybe moving this into global. And then what he's doing is cloning the button from the light DOM, moving it into the shadow DOM, stripping the style tag, and attaching a click event, which fires click on the light DOM object, which is really good for us for analytics because analytics can connect to the light DOM. The analytics that we've got set up is just not ready to connect to shadow DOM yet. They're not going to go in and rewrite their whole analytics suite so that they can pierce the shadow DOM. So instead, we're saying, okay, go ahead and attach your events over to the button. When you click the shadow DOM button, we're just going to fire an event on the original button. So that's a really like slick workaround. So this kind of opened up the door for us a little bit more to do something we've wanted to do more of, which is taking this light DOM fallback concept, using that as a form of like semantic data input, and then parsing that and injecting it into the correct places in the shadow DOM, where we have a little bit more control over style and a little bit more control over markup. So that's been really great. We're definitely going to move in this direction for our navigation component, which if I pull up redhat.com, this is a web component on our navigation here. If I inspect, we have PFE navigation. This is driven by light DOM right now, which was kind of a bear to style. And there's a lot of additional markup you have to put in the light DOM in order for this to upgrade successfully. So now that we've got this like idea of light DOM as data and upgrading it into the shadow DOM in a certain way, we can start to convert pieces of this particular web component into shadow DOM, and then we would still leave certain parts open. So like, this is a trigger object up here that says products, and then this content in here would be considered a tray, and that would stay slotted. This would all be like custom styles, put whatever you want in here. We don't care what goes in the tray. We care about the trigger, how it's styled, and the identifiers on it. And then that you have an open slot to put your tray content.
And so the analytics thing, because I know you've mentioned this before, and until I actually see it in context, I've been like, I don't understand. The analytics issue comes down to if they were to click, say, that button and it lives in shadow DOM, you wouldn't actually know what button it was.
Yeah, because the analytics is attaching on load a listener to the link or the button.
Okay.
And it's
That
attaching
makes
it
a
to
lot
the
more
light DOM. So if we're trying to move it into shadow DOM and the light DOM is hidden, then the user is no longer clicking the light DOM content. They're clicking the shadow DOM content. And so we have to pass that back to the hidden light DOM.
So this could also be a good methodology for people to bridge some of their like jQuery app, you know, like global scope driven selectors type of that, like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, because we live in that world of the in-between where it's like, oh, it's nice if you can start your website from scratch, but like most of us don't get that opportunity. So we have to take that old code and make sure it continues to work as we begin to look future forward and start to develop for the modern web. So we have to support the old stuff and, you know, migrate to the new stuff very slowly. So this is a good bridge for that. And then if we were talking about schema stuff, I could show a schema and kind of how it drives a lot of our stuff. So these are our schemas. All of them are generally formatted the same way. We have some information about the web component, what it's called, what it's supposed to do. There should be a description here. The name of the tag, the name of the class, just some general information to register it, and then information about the slots that it supports and the attributes. And I'm gonna pick a more complicated one because PFE button is pretty simple. But if I go to navigation, it's got a bananas schema. Navigation, here we go. So this, for example, like here's the skip navigation. It can accept any HTML in that slot, logo, any HTML search. This is a great example here. Search can only accept PFE navigation as a child. So this validates that to make sure that search does not contain anything other than a navigation item child. We have kind of custom indicators saying that it's a named slot versus just a default slot. All of this gets read into our web component. So we identify all of our slots, we identify all of the supported attributes, whether or not they've been prefixed, if they have defaults, whether or not they're required is listed here as well. And then on our web components, we import the schema data using build tools. So it's not something that happens client side. Let's see, navigation, JS. So here is schema URL. So this get schema URL is parsed by our build tools and injects the actual schema object that has all of the definitions for slots and attributes. And then inside of your component, our base class, which is Elements. Nope, that is wrong. Let's see. Base class. Here we go. Inside our base class, we do a map schema to component, basically. And you can optionally call this. This is because not every component that we have is upgraded to be driven by the schema. So you can optionally set this up, but like map schema to properties. This goes through and actually attaches those properties to your web component. So then inside of your JS for your web component, you can just query for like this dot color, this dot something else variant, and you can query for that and find out information about like the default value and then what are the accepted values. So you could do validation inside of your web component and throw like console errors if someone passes something in that's not supported. So you have a lot of flexibility for like understanding and enforcing the schema, which is pretty cool. And then this also is used in our storybook. So this is kind of what I was saying, like I love the single source of truth concept. So if I go to back to navigation and pull up the demo storybook, we have basically it calls the class and then the properties, which is what the schema is being attached to the web component as. It's called properties and slots. And so it queries for the properties object and it queries for the slot object, passes that object to the auto prop knobs, which is a utility similar to some stuff that Nikki has written. It's a utility that reads in that object and generates the knobs that you need in order to make it work. So if I pull up Storybook, you can see it has Boolean sticky navigation as a web component. It has a full width navigation attribute, so I can toggle that on and off and see what my example markup would look like. Some settings like close navigation on click event. I can unset that. This is for translation, so like our mobile menu label can be like le menu. I don't speak French. I don't know if that's obvious. Yeah, and you can go in and play with like what's supported here and not. So this is all auto-generated off the schema. So we don't have to like define each of these knobs individually, which is the dream, that your web component just builds your Storybook instance for you.
Darn it, Cassandra, now I'm going to go back and redo all of my stuff to add what you have.
Schema.
I will never get to move on to new things because I keep seeing cool things to do with this stuff that I already done.
Ditto.
So how do you generate is it fair to say that kind of our difference in methodology of the way we build these things is you all start with a schema and use that to build out the element, and we're kind of writing our element and using it to generate schema?
I would say it depends on the developer as to what order that happens in, but before it's committed, it happens. So
Okay.
like not every developer writes their schema first. Some developers write their web component and then go back in and build the schema. I'm a schema first developer because I came from our old pattern library where we were using schemas plus Twig to generate web Drupal CMS fields and build like a database experience that way. And so for me, like I just applied that same thing to web components and said like, okay, instead of building, you know, just a random component inside of Drupal, now I'm building a web component using the same methodology.
I am searching for a dev.to article now. I mean, I love the schema. I wish we could figure out a way that we write these things the same way. We have all these like circling concepts that are very similar and interrelated.
Told you, this is why I want to go back. I want to go back and try to pull all of this together.
Yeah, I've been watching the custom, I think it's customelements.json project that I think Justin Fagnani is a part of, and like it looks super cool and I want to apply it. It doesn't quite fit our
It doesn't
system
have
yet.
everything we need.
Right. So I'm like, I'm waiting for it to develop. I'm like, it'll get there. And I'm not quite ready to like contribute yet. I'm like, I'm just keeping an eye on it. Let's see, because eventually I want to move to the standard so that we're all on the same happy path.
And maybe we really need to have a conversation with them and us and have a massive meeting of the minds, because I can see benefits to all of these things, and it would be nice not to have to go back and redo every time I get, you know, inspired by more ideas.
Truth. And they're super nice. I'm sure they'd be happy to like join either this call or another call and chat about stuff like that.
As long as it's not Zoom, yes, they will. That's already come up, actually. Awesome, as always. So
y'all really quickly want to see the PFE icon thing I was mentioning?
Yeah,
it's not nearly as cool as the 3D.
Well,
like, it's super
well, we have 8 minutes and or 7 consarn. So yeah, I mean, you're welcome to show. I know Nikki wants to get rid of iron icons, and I sure as hell do at some point.
Yeah,
so.
it would be awesome to come up with a better solution for those.
Awesome. So this is really lightweight, just a really like straightforward solution, but really elegant. And I'm biased because my husband kind of came up with the idea. So, and I think he's awesome. But anyways, I've been working on this last couple of weeks to try and update it so that we can like update the path that the SVGs point to, so that if you have like a namespace, you can point your namespace to a different URL path where your SVGs can live. So the gist of this web component is it is a really simple tag. If I pull up, go back to my storybook, pull up icon. This is all it is. It's just PFE icon. You give it the name of an icon, and the first section is the icon set name, and then the last part of it is the icon name. And then you can configure it a little bit. You can give it size. You can give it color. You can give it a circle. But it's just really, really simple, straightforward. But what's cool about this is, like, in the past, we've had to load icon fonts and like sprites, and we have, you know, all of these like files with all of these SVGs, anything we might possibly need when you're building for a design system. You don't know what icon someone's going to want to put on a page. And so you need a way to let them select from your suite of icons and put it on a page dynamically. So this is a web component approach to that. What this does is you point it to a directory that's hosted somewhere that has all of your SVGs in that directory. And it is going to render the SVG for you on the fly. So if I go back to this page where I have the network tab up, you can see that the network tab is pulling all of these files from this is our built-in set. So it just comes with an RH and a web prefixed set of icons. These are Red Hat icons and our standard web icons. And it pulls them from this shared directory, and all of these icons live there. And it loads them individually. Granted, you're probably not going to have a page that loads 400 icons. You're probably going to load like 10 icons on a page. So the performance hit is not going to be insane. But even so, it's very efficient, which is cool. You can, let's see, what else? It has like a fallback, like a graceful fallback thing if it 404s. My chat window is in the way. Exit out of here. This is all the icons rendering, and you can use custom properties to like provide color to them and style. So if we look at the shadow root, here's the styles. It's using custom properties for kind of setting the colors and the background for when you do the circle style and all of that. And we have a fallback, which could be text, it could be nothing. If you don't want it to show anything when it falls back, you could have a fallback icon that you just embed, like an SVG fallback. You could just use text if you needed something, like if the icon has semantic value, you could put something there that semantically describes what it was for. If it doesn't, then you just have it fall back to nothing. And then it injects this SVG and uses the image X-link approach and points to that SVG file. And then kind of filters it. So this actually does work at IE, it works in Edge, assuming you're using shady CSS. But this works in all the older browsers too, which is kind of cool.
What the heck is an X-link?
That I cannot explain. Some amazing magic.
Yeah, really.
My husband put up.
That is, okay. I'm sold. I'm sold on that type of approach, because right now we've been throwing these like, oh, hey, it's somewhere in this icon set, load all 50.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you said laughingly, oh, it's not like you'd have 400. Yeah, I guarantee you we have pages because of the way Nikki works with her icon pickers where there might be 400.
Yeah, this will load it on the fly. You just have to have a hosted location that has all your SVGs. And it needs to be somewhere that your server can grab from and has permissions. So making sure that you don't have a CORS issue, for example. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that is a neat idea.
Do you have any kind of so it looks like that's in the shadow root, but is there something, you mentioned progressive enhancement with this as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you, so like down here, the like fail, like if the icon doesn't load at 404s or something, this markup looks like this, where it just has text that says like icon failed to load. So you can just put something in the slot and it will use that as your fallback. So that's your progressive enhancement. Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't.
Nice.
If it doesn't upgrade, it just kind of says that. You can also add an attribute that kind of preserves the space for the icon, because sometimes your layout requires that icon, and if it doesn't load, you don't really want the like layout to get janky. So you can do a preserve space, or you can let it collapse if you just want to pretend like it didn't exist in the first place. Let it collapse and go away if it fails. So that's kind of our progressive approach. Like if something fails, we want it to do it in a way that is expected for the design.
Yeah, Nikki, I could totally see us mashing that up with simple colors. So then, oh, it fails, but it said it's supposed to be a circle and it's orange. Well, at least put an orange circle there, so it's not, you know, absurd.
I could totally see that.
Gosh, I would hate if someone did that.
I hate when you do that, Brian. I've already got other stuff that now I want to do. You're wrong.
You're wrong.
You're such a bully. I'm not playing with you anymore, or at least not for the next week.
At least until next week when we do episode 11. I know. That's that's awesome, Cassandra. Yeah, we need to clone Nikki about 50 times, and then she can work on that.
But my brain twin is here, so that's already like one Nikki clone.
Yeah, just copy it.
Copy.
Yeah.
So with that, we are at time for this week. I'm going to have to say this is a pretty phenomenal episode as far as just raw diversity of the types of projects being shown and where people's contexts are coming from. Smithsonian thing was awesome. A lot of awesome stuff as far as like piecing through React and seeing different applications, progressive enhancement. This was awesome. So that is how you do a 10th episode, everybody. So let's have a little secret between you and me and everybody else that's going to watch on YouTube. Come back next week and let's do that again, because it'll be 1-1, which is the only thing better than 1-0. So thank you all for joining, for participating. Tom's going to get this up on YouTube, as I mentioned. Look for us on YouTube. It's ElmsLN is the channel. Tom, do we have a bit.ly for that? Because I know we don't have a vanity URL just yet.
I'm trying to find a good way to phrase the bit.ly, because I can't think of anything short and nice that's not taken. But if you go on YouTube and look up like ElmsLN Uncode, it will be like the first videos that show up. So that would be probably the quickest. And also, like if you're in the Slack, I put reminders of when videos are up in Slack, or if you follow us on Twitter at HAXCamp, HAXCAMP, or at ElmsLN, ELMSLN on Twitter. We will also post on there when new episodes, so there's multiple avenues that you can go to see when we post these.
So thank you for joining us, especially thank you to the Open Publishing Fest folks for stopping by. You're always welcome. And I believe next week we're also on the schedule for Open Publishing Fest. So until then, hacks you later.